You lose it in the meeting just for a second. A flash of anger, a defensive edge in your voice. And in that moment, that single unguarded moment, you undo 6 months of building trust. Or you're alone at night and the fear creeps in, the doubt. And instead of sitting with it, you reach for the phone, the bottle, the screen, anything to avoid what you're feeling. And the next morning you've traded temporary relief for lasting regret. Here's what nobody wants to admit. Most people aren't in control of their lives because they're not in control of their emotions. They're passengers, hijacked by anger, anxiety, shame, desire. One bad feeling and the whole day derails. One trigger and years of discipline evaporate. The Stoics knew something the modern world has forgotten. Your emotions will either serve you or enslave you. There is no middle ground. If you want to build something that lasts, a reputation, a relationship, a life, you need to master this first, because everything else falls apart without it. Let's start with what emotional control is not. It's not pretending you don't feel. It's not putting on a mask and white-knuckling through every difficult moment. It's not becoming some cold, robotic version of yourself that never laughs, never cries, never feels the weight of being human. That's suppression, and suppression doesn't work. It just moves the pain underground, where it festers and eventually explodes. Real emotional control is something different. It's the space between stimulus and response. It's feeling the anger rise and choosing not to let it speak. It's recognizing fear and moving forward anyway. It's experiencing sadness without drowning in it. It's the ability to feel everything and still remain the author of your actions. Think about the last time you reacted poorly. Maybe you snapped at someone who didn't deserve it. Maybe you sent a text you regretted 5 minutes later. Maybe you made a decision out of fear that cost you something you can't get back. In that moment, you weren't driving. Your emotion was, and here's the brutal truth. Every time you let emotion make the decision, you're training yourself to be weaker. You're reinforcing a pattern. You're teaching your nervous system that feelings get the final vote. And the world notices. People watch how you handle pressure. They watch what happens when you're criticized, when you're disappointed, when things don't go your way. They might not say anything, but they're taking notes, and they're deciding whether you're someone they can trust, follow, depend on. Because emotional control isn't just about you. It's about everyone who has to deal with the wreckage when you lose it. Your family walking on eggshells because they don't know which version of you they'll get. Your colleagues hesitating to give you honest feedback because they've seen how you react. Your opportunities shrinking because people remember the outburst more than the apology. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength, it's not loud, it's not flashy. It's the quiet certainty that no matter what life throws at you, you won't be the one who breaks. You won't be the weak link. You won't be the reason everything falls apart. That's what's at stake. Not just your peace, everything. 1. Emotions are data, not directions. Your emotions are trying to tell you something. Fear says there's danger. Anger says a boundary was crossed. Sadness says something mattered and now it's gone. That's useful information. The problem is most people treat emotions like commands instead of signals. They feel anxious, so they avoid. They feel angry, so they attack. They feel desire, so they indulge. No filter, no assessment, just immediate compliance. But emotions aren't designed to make decisions. They're designed to alert you, to say, pay attention here. What you do with that alert, that's where your power lives. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That gap between feeling and reacting is everything. It's the difference between wisdom and impulse, between strength and fragility, between living deliberately and being lived by your nervous system. So when anger rises, pause. Don't ask, should I be feeling this? Ask, what is this telling me? Maybe it's telling you a boundary needs to be set, but that doesn't mean you set it while the anger is driving. You let the information land, you let the heat cool, and then you act from clarity, not rage. Same with fear. Fear isn't always telling you to run. Sometimes it's telling you this matters, so prepare. Sometimes it's telling you you're entering new territory, stay alert. The feeling isn't the problem, it's letting the feeling dictate your next move without conscious choice. When you learn to separate the signal from the response, you gain something most people never develop. Emotional intelligence that actually matters, not the kind you put on a resume, the kind that keeps you functional when everyone around you is falling apart. 2. Control requires observation, not force. Most people think emotional control means clenching your jaw and forcing yourself to stay calm. That's not control, that's pressure building with no release valve. And eventually it explodes. Real control begins with observation. You feel anger bubbling up. Instead of judging it or fighting it, you watch it. You name it. I'm feeling defensive right now. I'm experiencing frustration. You treat it like weather passing through, something you notice but don't become. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When you observe your emotions, you remove their automatic authority. You're no longer fused with them. There's you, and there's emotion. 2. Separate things, and that separation creates choice. Here's the practice. When a strong emotion hits, take 3 breaths before you respond to anything. Not because you're trying to calm down, but because you're creating space. Space to think, space to assess, space to choose the response instead of defaulting to the reaction. In that space, you can ask better questions. Will this matter in 5 years? Am I responding to what's actually happening or to a story I'm telling myself? What would the person I want to become do right now? These questions aren't meant to talk you out of feeling. They're meant to redirect the energy. Because anger, properly channeled, becomes determination. Fear, properly understood, becomes preparation. Sadness, properly processed, becomes depth. But none of that happens if you're still letting emotion steer the wheel. 3. Emotional discipline compounds over time. Every time you choose restraint over reaction, you're not just handling one moment well. You're building infrastructure, you're training your nervous system, you're proving to yourself that you're not a slave to impulse. And that proof accumulates. The first time you pause instead of snapping back, it's hard, brutally hard. Every fiber wants to defend, explain, attack. But the second time, slightly easier. The 10th time, you recognize the pattern faster. The 100th time, it's instinct. You've rewired the reflex. This is what most people miss. Emotional control is a compounding skill. Every rep matters. Every time you catch yourself before the outburst, before the spiral, before the regret, you're investing in the person you're becoming. Aristotle understood this deeply. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. You don't become emotionally controlled by reading about it. You become emotionally controlled by practicing it in the small, unglamorous moments that nobody sees. When the driver cuts you off and you breathe instead of honking. When someone interrupts you and you let them finish instead of talking over them. When you get bad news and you sit with it for 10 minutes before calling everyone you know. These aren't trivial moments, they're training. And the discipline you build in traffic, in meetings, in everyday frustrations, that's the same discipline that holds you together when real crisis hits. Because when the stakes are high, you don't rise to the occasion. You default to your training. If you've spent years reacting impulsively, that's what you'll do when it matters most. But if you've spent years practicing control, that's what shows up when the pressure's on. 4. Uncontrolled emotions destroy what you can't rebuild. Some mistakes you can recover from. You can apologize. You can try again. You can rebuild trust over time. But some things, once destroyed by emotional reactivity, don't come back. The relationship where you said something you can never unsay. The opportunity lost because someone saw you lose composure in a critical moment. The reputation built over years and demolished in one rage-filled email. People remember how you made them feel. They remember the version of you that showed up when you were angry, scared, overwhelmed. And no matter how many times you say, "That's not who I really am," they know the truth. That is who you are when the pressure's on. This is why emotional control isn't optional if you want to build anything lasting. Because growth requires trust. Trust requires consistency. And consistency is impossible if your emotions are running the show. Think about the people in your life you genuinely respect, the ones you'd trust in a crisis, the ones whose word means something. They're not perfect. They feel anger, fear, frustration, just like everyone else. But they don't let those feelings hijack them. They don't explode. They don't crumble. They stay solid even when everything around them shakes. That solidity, it's earned. Through 1,000 moments where they chose restraint. Through years of practicing control when it would have been easier to just react. And people feel it. They might not articulate it, but they sense it. This person is safe. This person is reliable. This person won't detonate under pressure. That reputation is built in private, but it pays dividends in public. In the opportunities that come your way because people trust you. In the relationships that deepen because people feel safe around you. In the influence you naturally gain because your presence doesn't come with volatility. Mastery means feeling fully without acting foolishly. Here's the paradox people struggle with. Emotional control doesn't mean emotional death. You're not trying to become someone who doesn't feel. You're trying to become someone who feels deeply, but doesn't let feelings make foolish decisions. There's a difference between experiencing sadness and wallowing in it, between feeling anger and weaponizing it, between acknowledging fear and letting it paralyze you. The emotionally controlled person feels everything, maybe even more than others, because they're not constantly running from their inner world, but they've learned to hold their emotions without being held by them. Seneca wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." When someone tries to provoke you, they're inviting you into their chaos. They want you reactive, defensive, off balance. Emotional control is the refusal to accept that invitation. You feel the provocation. You notice the urge to fire back, but you don't. Not because you're weak, because you're wise. Because you understand that your composure is more powerful than any comeback. Because you've learned that the person who stays calm controls the room. This is what separates boys from men. Not age, not accomplishments. Emotional sovereignty, the ability to be in the fire without becoming the fire. So what does a life built on emotional control actually look like? It looks like freedom. Not the kind the world sells where you do whatever you feel, but real freedom. The freedom to be yourself regardless of circumstance. To be angry without being destructive. To be afraid without being paralyzed. To be disappointed without being destroyed. You walk into conflict and people notice you're different. You're not escalating. You're not defensive. You're listening, processing, responding with intention. That unnerves people who are used to emotional combat. They don't know how to handle someone who won't be baited. That's power. Quiet, undeniable power. You receive criticism, and instead of shutting down or lashing out, you actually hear it. You separate what's useful from what's projection. You thank them and move on. No drama, no spiral, just information processed and integrated. You face setbacks, and yes, you feel the disappointment. It lands heavy, but you don't let it write the next chapter. You give yourself space to feel it, and then you shift into problem-solving mode, because you've trained yourself to move through emotion, not camp in it. But let's be clear, this isn't about becoming invulnerable. You're still human. There will be moments when the emotion wins, when you snap, when you react poorly, when you lose your center. That's not failure, that's feedback. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. It's noticing faster, recovering quicker, apologizing cleaner, learning deeper, because the difference between emotional children and emotional adults isn't that adults never lose control. It's that adults take responsibility when they do. They don't blame, they don't justify. They own it, make it right, and extract the lesson. That ownership, that's part of the control too, because you're not letting shame hijack you either. You're acknowledging what happened, repairing what you can, and recommitting to the practice. And here's what most people never realize until it's too late. Your emotional control determines your ceiling. You can be brilliant, talented, hardworking, but if you can't control your emotions under pressure, there's a limit to how far you'll go. Because at higher levels, everyone is capable. What separates people is temperament, composure, the ability to stay functional when everything's on fire. Leaders aren't chosen because they're the smartest in the room. They're chosen because they're the steadiest. Because when chaos hits, everyone looks for the person who isn't panicking, the person who's still thinking clearly, the person whose emotions aren't making the decisions. That person gets followed, gets trusted, gets opportunities that others don't even see because they're too busy being reactive. So if you want to go further in your career, your relationships, your personal development, this is where you start. Not with strategy, not with networking, with the fundamentals. Can you stay calm when provoked? Can you stay focused when anxious? Can you stay clear when angry? Because if the answer is no, everything else is built on sand. Here's your practice for the next 30 days. Identify your emotional trigger, the one that gets you every time. Maybe it's criticism, maybe it's disrespect, maybe it's feeling ignored or misunderstood. For the next month, when that trigger shows up, pause for 10 seconds before responding, not to suppress the feeling, to observe it. Notice where you feel it in your body. Notice the thoughts it generates. Notice the urge to react, and then choose your response, not from the emotion, but from the person you're trying to become. Document what you notice, what patterns emerge, what you learn about yourself. Because self-awareness is the foundation of self-mastery. This isn't comfortable work. It's going to feel awkward, maybe even fake at first. That's normal. You're interrupting patterns that have run automatically for years. But stick with it. Because on the other side of this practice is something most people never experience. The confidence that comes from knowing you won't be the one who destroys what you've built. You won't be the weak link. You won't be the reason everything falls apart. The Stoics lived this. They proved it. They left us the blueprint. Now it's your turn. Stay focused. Stay grounded. And remember, the quiet work you do today is shaping the strength they'll never see coming.